Welcome to the hall, everyone. Settle in, get comfortable. Today we're diving into a chronological explainer of what is arguably one of the most foundational texts in human history, the Book of Genesis. We're going to read the text exactly as it was recorded, tracking this incredible, unbroken ancestral thread. It literally begins in the cosmos and weaves its way all the way down to the sands of Egypt. So what we have here is a true epic, a story of creation, of some deeply, deeply human flaws, and of divine promises.
The source tucks us right away with this incredibly profound image. In the hush before hours were counted, Elohim called the beginning forth. Just imagine that, the breath of Elohim moving over a shoreless deep, poised over an absolute abyss. And from that complete silence, light is spoken directly into the dark. It sets this majestic stage, walking us through 6 days of creation, where the seas, the stars in the sky, and all living creatures are so carefully fashioned. It all culminates, of course, in humanity made in the divine image. Everything is declared very good, and then, on the 7th day, a sacred rest is established right there in the Garden of Eden.
Okay, let's dive into this and map things out. To really grasp this epic, we need to trace a distinct bloodline across 4 major eras. We start with the era of Adam, formed right from the dust and animated by the breath of his maker in pure innocence. And from there, we follow the generations straight through the turbulent times of Noah, Abram, and eventually Jacob.
But as you know, that innocence in Eden, it's completely shattered by the tasting of the tree of knowledge, which leads to humanity's exile. And that brings us to humanity's first great sibling rivalry. We've got Cain, the tiller of the ground, and Abel, the keeper of flocks. When Abel's offering is favored by Yahweh and Cain's just isn't, the text actually describes sin as crouching at the door. It's such a visceral image. Consumed by jealousy, Cain strikes down his brother. It's humanity's first murder. He asks, "Am I my brother's keeper?" as Abel's blood literally cries out from the ground. As a result, Cain is cursed to wander, banished to the land of Nod, east of Eden.
Section 2, the cleansing and the covenant, the generations of Noah. So as the lineage of Cain and his brother Seth multiplies, the earth just fills with people. But unfortunately, it also fills with absolute violence and corruption. The text tells us that the evil of man's heart grieved Yahweh deeply, prompting a divine decree that man's days are now limited to 120 years, and the earth is going to face a massive cleansing. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of what happens next. Out of the entire earth, one righteous man, Noah, finds grace. He's told to build an ark. And not just any boat. The text gives us the exact blueprints. 300 cubits long, 50 wide, and 30 high. Inside this massive vessel made of gopher wood, Noah saves his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, along with pairs of all living creatures. The skies just open up. It rains for 40 days and 40 nights, and the floodwaters prevail for 150 days before the ark finally comes to rest on the mountains of Ararat. When the ground finally dries out, Noah offers a sacrifice, and Elohim establishes an everlasting covenant. The sign of this promise? A bow set in the clouds. It's a guarantee that waters will never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. So the earth is repopulated through Noah's sons. But humanity's ambition doesn't stay quiet for long. It flares right back up on the plain of Shinar. They actually gather to build this massive city and a tower reaching into the heavens. You probably know it as the Tower of Babel. In response, Yahweh comes down, confuses their languages, and scatters them across the entire earth. Section 3, the patriarchs' journey, the calling of Abram. After that massive scattering at Babel, the sweeping global focus of our narrative suddenly zooms way in. It gets intimately personal, focusing on just one man from the line of Shem. Abram is called straight out of his homeland, Ur of the Chaldeans. He's told to leave his father's house and journey to the land of Canaan. With his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot by his side, he steps out into total uncertainty. Elohim appears to this ailing, childless man as El Shaddai, God who suffices. It's a monumental moment. His name is changed from Abram to Abraham, meaning the father of a multitude of nations. Yahweh institutes an everlasting covenant right there, promising him lands stretching from the river of Egypt all the way to the Euphrates, and descendants promised to be as numerous as the dust of the earth and the stars in the sky. To seal the deal, the physical sign of circumcision is commanded for all males in his household. Now, what's really interesting about this part of the story is the bitter tension that takes root right inside Abraham's own tent. Sarai is still barren, so she gives her Egyptian maidservant, Hagar, to Abraham. Hagar conceives Ishmael. But things get so harsh between the women that Hagar is actually driven out into the wilderness. Out there, totally alone, Yahweh hears her. She calls him El Roi, the God of seeing. He promises that Ishmael will be a wild man and the father of 12 princes, but Elohim makes one thing absolutely clear. The eternal covenant? That is exclusively reserved for Isaac, the child of the promise, miraculously born to Sarah when Abraham is literally 100 years old.
And then we hit what is easily one of the most chilling tests in all of antiquity. Elohim calls out to Abraham with a piercing command: take your son, your only one, Isaac, to the land of Moriah and offer him there as an ascent offering. Just let that sink in. Abraham obeys in agonizing, absolute silence. He binds the son he loves, raises the knife, and at the very last second, a messenger of Yahweh stops his hand. His obedience is proven. A ram, caught right there in the thicket, is offered instead. Abraham names that spot Yahweh Yireh. Yahweh will provide.
Section 4. The struggle for the promise. The trials of Israel. As Abraham's incredible life comes to a close, we transition right into the next generational epoch. Isaac marries Rebekah, who is from Nahor's city. But much like Sarah before her, Rebekah struggles with barrenness. When Yahweh finally answers Isaac's prayers, Rebekah's womb literally becomes a battleground. She's told that 2 warring nations are inside her and that the elder is going to serve the younger.
Man, these twins could not be more different. You've got Esau, the elder, red, hairy, the skilled hunter, totally favored by his dad, Isaac. Then you've got Jacob, the younger, quiet, likes to dwell in the tents, completely favored by his mom, Rebekah. And this dynamic leads to the ultimate sibling deception. First, Esau recklessly trades away his entire birthright to Jacob for some red lentil stew. Later, with Rebekah pulling the strings, Jacob actually drapes himself in goat skins to feel hairy like his brother and steals his blind father's irrevocable blessing right out from under Esau. Let's move along and see how this builds, because Jacob obviously has to run for his life from his brother's murderous rage, fleeing to Haran on his very first night as a fugitive, using an actual stone for a pillow. He has this incredible vision. He dreams of a massive stairway connecting earth straight to heaven, with messengers of Elohim going up and descending down. Yahweh stands above it, promising him protection and the land. Waking up, Jacob anoints that stone pillar with oil and calls the place Bethel. This is the moment the fugitive starts becoming a visionary. He then heads to his uncle Laban's place, where he ends up working 14 long years just to marry Leah and the woman he truly loves, Rachel. Flash forward a few decades, Jacob is finally heading back to Canaan, and he is absolutely terrified of facing Esau again. The night before they meet, at the ford of the Jabbok, everything changes. Left all alone in the dark, Jacob ends up physically wrestling with a divine stranger until dawn. He survives, but he walks away with a wrenched hip and, more importantly, a brand new identity. No longer shall you be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with Elohim and with men. He's no longer the deceiver. This massive spiritual victory paves the way for a beautiful, tearful reconciliation with Esau. Now, out of all that bitter, prolonged rivalry for Jacob's affection between Leah, Rachel, and their maidservants Bilhah and Zilpah, 12 sons are born. Just 12. But these 12 sons are crucial. They go on to establish the foundational tribes of Israel, carrying that huge covenant promise forward into a completely uncertain future.
Section 5, The Path to Egypt. This brings us to the final, sweeping act of our epic. We are shifting our focus entirely to Joseph. Joseph is the beloved 17-year-old son of Jacob's old age, born to Rachel. And Jacob does not hide his favoritism. He gives Joseph this highly ornate tunic, which just fuels massive resentment among the older brothers. Then, Joseph has these prophetic dreams where his brothers' sheaves of grain and literally the sun, moon, and stars are bowing down to him. Well, that resentment, it boils over into flat-out murderous jealousy. The brothers actually conspire to kill him. Instead, they throw him into a dry wilderness pit, and his life goes into a free fall. He's sold to Ishmaelite traders for 20 silver shekels, dragged off in bondage to Egypt, and bought by Potiphar, a captain of Pharaoh's guard. But here is the key detail. The text makes a major point to emphasize that Yahweh was with Joseph. Despite the betrayal, everything the guy touches prospers. He becomes the ruler of Potiphar's whole house.
But then, after refusing the advances of Potiphar's wife and fleeing, he's falsely accused and thrown right into a royal dungeon. Yet even there, in the dark, Yahweh grants him favor. While he's locked up, Joseph is put in charge of serving Pharaoh's disgraced chief cupbearer and chief baker. One night, both of these guys have incredibly vivid dreams. Joseph correctly interprets them both. He tells the cupbearer that his dream of 3 vine branches means he'll be restored to Pharaoh's side in 3 days. But the baker's dream of 3 baskets eaten by birds, that means he'll be hanged on a tree. Joseph asks for just one thing in return: remember me to Pharaoh. But of course, once the cupbearer gets his job back, he completely forgets about Joseph. For 2 whole years.
So the crucial point in all of this arrives when Pharaoh himself starts having these terrifying nightmares that absolutely none of his royal magicians can unravel. Suddenly, the cupbearer remembers the Hebrew slave in the dungeon. Joseph is pulled out of prison, shaved, and brought standing right before the king. When Pharaoh asks him to interpret, Joseph doesn't take the credit. He boldly says the interpretation belongs to Elohim alone. He breaks it down. Pharaoh's dream of 7 scrawny cows eating 7 plump cows, and 7 withered ears of grain swallowing 7 full ones. It means Egypt is about to experience 7 years of massive plenty, followed immediately by 7 years of severe, absolutely devastating famine. But Joseph doesn't just drop the bad news. He pitches a whole plan to survive the famine. Pharaoh sees the spirit of Elohim in this guy and elevates him right there on the spot. He hands Joseph his own signet ring, dresses him in fine cambric, and gives him a new Egyptian name, Zaphanath-Paneah. Think about that. At 30 years old, this dreamer from Canaan is suddenly the governor of Egypt. He holds the absolute power to ration out grain to a starving world. It's a promotion that literally alters the trajectory of human history. And sure enough, when that severe famine finally hits Canaan, Jacob sends 10 of his sons down to Egypt to buy food. The very same brothers who sold Joseph into slavery are now bowing face down in the dirt before him, entirely unaware that they are fulfilling the exact dream they tried to destroy. It's an incredible scene, and it leaves us hanging on this huge, provocative question. As these brothers bow before the unrecognized ruler of Egypt, bringing that ancestral thread to its absolute breaking point, how in the world will a nation promised the land of Canaan survive while trapped in the grip of a foreign empire? That is exactly where our source material leaves us today, and honestly, it is a brilliant place to pause and just ponder the sheer scale of the Genesis epic.